The anime begins with the protagonist feeling good, listening to his music while resting under the tree. Then after seeing a feline that had a band on its belly, he decides to go shopping. We get a mental presentation of him as he returns with the shopping. And standing at the bus stop, we already see that he is brave, saving a child. In this, the protagonist shows that he is a master chef and prepares that ramen, while boasting that his food is very good, that not even the gods could resist. The most incredible thing is that he is right, because when he finishes the ramen, a portal opens and a goddess appears. The goddess drawn in the ideal of Asian beauty remains in this form for a few seconds, until the protagonist drops the bowl of food and she picks up the pot in her chibi form, and soon after picking it up, she devours all the food without using any cutlery. The frightened protagonist asks who she is. She introduces herself as Dora, but also says she has a full name, which is a set of names from Greek gods. The protagonist throws the mini-goddess away once, twice, and when he sees her again, he thinks she is a ghost. In this, she explains that she is a summoned spirit and devours all the food in the refrigerator. Once again, the protagonist decides to get rid of her, but she comes back again. After giving up on throwing her away, he decides to ask her questions. She explains that it is a summoned spirit, that it is very old, that battery saving is in fashion, and that the other form is her complete mode. She says that people have used food in invocation rituals for a long time and that she was invoked by the protagonist's food. The incredulous protagonist takes his bike and goes to class, but even so, she doesn't let go of him and follows him. And along the way she tells him that she is a goddess and that she can give him a lot of power, fame, and wealth. She continues to irritate him during classes, and the protagonist discovers that she is invisible to others. We then see the protagonist being approached and receiving a love letter, but before he can take the letter, the mini-goddess irritates him again, and he throws his backpack on the ground and tells the goddess to get away from him. This makes the girl feel like she was super rejected, and he is still called rude by the mini-goddess. Later, the protagonist appears with a bunch of food and incense, then tries to undo her invocation. Then the mini-goddess starts crying and returns to her human-sized form. There, the goddess tells a sad story to the protagonist that if she doesn't sign the contract, she will wander alone like a ghost for 100 years. Seeing that she managed to move the protagonist, she asks him to take a walk with her before she wastes herself. In this, she tells about the secrets of the world, activating the ability to see people's invocation power, which interferes in various aspects of life. She shows the power she can give to the protagonist and makes a contract with him. After that, she returns to her chibi form and starts making fun of the protagonist, who makes it seem like she doesn't care, and she says that he has potential, jumps on his back, and they fly around the city, in which case, she gets hungry and loses control of the flight. Back in Each, the two are all hurt and the electricity goes out because he didn't pay the bill. In this, she shows yet another power that illuminates and heals. The protagonist is amazed. And they talk again, and when asking about the mini-goddess's past, we see a lot of fight scenes, with her being imprisoned at the end. Then he breaks down and starts to sleep. And from afar we see that the protagonist is being watched. The next day, we see that the goddess is sunbathing in the middle of the square while the protagonist is seeing that he's flying and the felled tree were noticed and reported. Then, after he puts on the phone and starts playing, the goddess is captured and devoured by a carnivorous plant that runs away. The goddess says that at a distance from her master she cannot use her power. The protagonist chases the carnivorous plant through the city until he arrives at a festival, and while looking for the carnivorous plant, he is interrupted by a huge extra who complains about the dump he gave the girl. She destroys a pile of tiles with a karate chop. The protagonist darkens the goddess telepathically, and when the girl goes to declare herself to the protagonist again, he has already run away. The goddess is weakening, and a boy with glasses starts talking, and when the protagonist sees a flower walking, he jumps, steps on the boy's face, runs away and jumps on top of the walking flower. In this we see that it is a child, doing cosplay, and we see a reference to a game. Tell me in the comments what game this is, if you know it. Then, through the telepathic link, the protagonist discovers where the goddess is. And after searching and not finding the carnivorous plant in the middle of a rock show, the protagonist provokes the goddess, saying that he realized that he will be able to get rid of it. Then, the goddess gets very angry and starts attacking the carnivorous plant. He finds the carnivorous plant and gets very close to it. With that, her power returns and she leaves the plant, and how can I say, in the way that humans see the world. The master of the carnivorous plant appears, and the goddess says she will make salad from the plant, but the summoner disappears. Returning, the goddess asks how the protagonist identified the summoner, and he gives an elaborate explanation about how normal people cannot see summoned spirits, about the distance from the summoner, about the route the plant took, and even about the clothing of the summoner. With that, the goddess admired his detective skills, but the truth is that he was making fun of her. He discovered the summoner because she came out of the crowd. The school principal is the one who gives orders to the summoner and is interested in the protagonist's potential. We see the summoner going to the protagonist who is sleeping at school and gives him a letter with a black rose. His classmates open the letter and discover their meeting place and follow the protagonist the entire way. And in the middle of the forest, plants trap the protagonist's classmates and a path opens up. When you find the summoner, she is tending a garden of black roses. The carnivorous plant tells the protagonist to hand over the goddess, and the protagonist calls the goddess his pet, and says that he is already very attached to her, and that it is his duty to protect her. Then the summoner throws a rose as if it were a dart, and a battle begins. While the protagonist dodges whips, the goddess is stalling to find something that the protagonist can use. After summoning a giant tree golem, the summoner on that golem's shoulder goes after the goddess, who is captured. Before she is hit by a slap from the tree, the protagonist jumps to save the goddess, and two cleavers made with the goddess's power are generated, and the protagonist manages to save her, cutting down the tree. Then in a punching match with the tree golem, the protagonist wins, and when he was about to be hit by the golem's other hand, the goddess activates her wings and flies with the protagonist. With two energy boots and daggers, the protagonist slices the tree. After the golem falls, the goddess says that she didn't know that the protagonist knew how to fight, but he says that he only knows how to cook, and used the daggers as if they were kitchen knives. And while the summoner disappeared with the golem, the goddess decided to attack her from behind, screaming. But the protagonist stops her, and says that he is not going to end her life and that she was holding back. The goddess asks how he knows, and he shows that there are 4 other golems behind her. And the goddess starts to make a bad excuse, and calls the summoner and the carnivorous plant to eat with them. The carnivorous plant is angry with the goddess, and in the middle of a sermon she was giving to the goddess, and when she says that the summoner is not a glutton like the goddess, the summoner's belly growls and she is embarrassed. Then we change scene, and everyone is eating the prota's food. And the carnivorous plant asks for forgiveness for their behavior. And in the apology, the carnivorous plant explains that there are good and villainous summoners, and after telling them to join, the summoner shuts the plant up with a chicken leg and leaves. The protagonist follows, and the summoner says her name. Her name is Hannah. She says she will keep an eye on the protagonist 24 hours a day, gives the protagonist another black rose, and leaves. One scene shows a man walking through the flames and a catwoman calling him her brother. Then he turns into a crow and disappears. We see that this was a dream of the Catwoman, who is surrounded by cats, one of which is the cat we saw before with the protagonist. The scene changes and a giraffe arrives in the protagonist's room, and soon after more and more animals arrive at school. The protagonist leaves there with Dora. And after passing by a panda, we see that the city is full of animals, some of which are even playing sports. The news appears and the city is being evacuated because the animals have escaped from the zoo. Catwoman is laughing and saying that the city is now theirs. The protagonist thinks she is in danger and jumps in to save her from the animals that were following her. So after he scolds her, she and the animals make an expression that says they are embarrassed and she gets angry. He sees the cat he normally sees, so he picks her up to get out of there and his face is scratched. And when the cat girl gives the protagonist's name, he gets confused. We see Hannah watching from above and going to attack the Catwoman. After creating a smoke screen, she uses her plants to trap the animals. The protagonist watches the carnivorous plant argue with the Catwoman until she decides to attack Hannah. We see that it is an agile battle between the two. Catwoman can summon energy claws, which she uses to attack Hannah, who uses a plant whip. With an eagle-eyed skill, Catwoman was able to handle Hannah's blows, and when he was on top of her, he became an energy bear. After Hannah dodges, Catwoman attacks a part of the street at her, and after defending herself, Hannah summons a tree golem. The fight looks like a battle of Megazords. The protagonist is shown, and the goddess acting as commentator, and Hannah uses the carnivorous plant to strengthen the golem and grow 2 more arms. Thus, the golem destroys the bear. The energy released from the bear becomes a pack of wolves, and after the golem grows thorns, it turns like a pawn. The cat that scratched the protagonist's face. It is all hurt, and the energy becomes a snake and wraps around the tree golem, and after the snake rips off an arm from the golem throws the snake. Then the protagonist looks at Hannah and the cat, and grabs the goddess and throws spiritual chains, stopping the fight. The protagonist tells them to talk, and the cat that was with the Catwoman is the summoner. The protagonist takes the cat on his lap, and in that, the Catwoman turns into energy and enters the cat. The protagonist gives them a hard time, and starts tending to the cat's wounds. Then a flashback occurs, which shows the protagonist meeting and treating the cat for the first time. And at the end of the flashback, the goddess looks jealous and tells Hannah that the protagonist has already subdued the summoner, so everything is over. Comment here what you thought of this anime. Don't forget to leave a like, and tell me if you want more of this anime here on the channel. See you in the next video.